Hey guys, I'm Alan here, and before I jump into this video, I just want to ask you guys to hit the subscribe button, leave a like under this video. It helps out a lot, so I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to do that. Alright, now that's over. If I were to ask you guys where you think the Brooklyn Nets are going to end up in April next year, where do you think they're going to be? Are they going to be the number one seed in the Eastern Conference? I wouldn't say so, particularly because of the way that the Brooklyn Nets were dealt with last year by the Boston Celtics. And by that I mean how they got swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round of the playoffs last year. It was very disappointing because going into the season last year, the Brooklyn Nets and the Los Angeles Lakers were the two teams that were favorited to go to the NBA Finals. They were the two juggernaut, and ironically, both of those two teams didn't really perform up to those expectations. The Los Angeles Lakers didn't even make the playoffs, and then on top of that, the Brooklyn Nets came apart at the seams mid-season when James Harden left, and then the cherry on top was they got completely swept by the Boston Celtics in the first round of the playoffs. But luckily for them, there is help on the way in the form of Ben Simmons. Now, many may say that that's not really much of help at all, and in fact that his lack of shot-making abilities make him an actual liability to the Brooklyn Nets. I would disagree, because although Ben Simmons isn't a really good shooter, isn't up to par with guards in the modern NBA, he still adds some sort of value to whatever team he's on. And judging from how the Brooklyn Nets fared against the Boston Celtics last playoffs, the Brooklyn Nets could use every ounce of help that they can get. And I think Ben Simmons can make them better next year if they get the right Ben Simmons. But the question now becomes, how much can Ben Simmons help them out by? What things does Ben Simmons really do well that lifts the Brooklyn Nets up from what they were before? And precisely how much will they improve next year? Well, my answer to that is length and defense. Those are the two things that Ben Simmons is offering to the Brooklyn Nets. Those are his most valuable assets that he can bring to any team, because Lord knows it isn't his shooting capabilities. Ben Simmons' incredible height at 6'10" for a guard and his 84-inch wingspan makes him a very formidable foe on a defensive end for any team to deal with. If you couple that with Kevin Durant's height and length, it becomes very hard for you to drive to the basket. It becomes very hard for you to play your game well at the perimeter. And so right off the bat, the Brooklyn Nets become better there. When it comes to guards, the Brooklyn Nets don't really have guards, or they didn't have guards that were really good at defense. Think about it. They had James Harden. James Harden's known for everything but his defensive capabilities. Ask anyone in the entire league. They had Seth Curry. Seth Curry's like Steph Curry. He is a liability on a defensive end. And then Kyrie Irving. Last year, the Boston Celtics won Game 1 because of Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving was sleeping on defense. Kyrie Irving, although he's a juggernaut on offense, he is a defensive liability. So for them to bring in a guard that has the complete opposite of what they've had before, I think right off the bat, right there, the Brooklyn Nets become better already. And although Ben doesn't shoot or make any of his threes, he is still valuable without it. He still managed to survive in this league without the three-point shot. And that's saying something. And with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your team on an offensive end, you don't really need to be a sharpshooter. I mean, you have Seth Curry, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving. Those three guys, they're spectacular shooting the three, so you don't really need to be a sharpshooter or a sniper. I think Ben Simmons can offer value elsewhere. The only problem is that with Ben Simmons, whatever is going on with him psychologically, the Brooklyn Nets need to deal with that properly. Because although Ben doesn't make, three-point shots or mid-range shots, Ben has to absolutely be able to make his free throw shots, right? And he doesn't have confidence in himself to make those shots. When he goes to the free throw line, it's like he freezes up, right? And many players tend to do this. When they go to the free throw line, the moment becomes too big for them. They get in their head. They start thinking, what if I miss? What do I do? they get in their head. It even happens to LeBron. The good thing is that's fixable because it's all in here. It's all in their head. It's all in Ben's head. And if the Nets were smart, what they need to do is go get Ben Simmons, a sports psychologist, and help him work through whatever goes on in his head when he has to go shoot free throws, right? Because that is one of the things that cost him being with the 76ers. That's one of the things that really drove him and the 76ers apart. Because if you remember in 2021, Ben Simmons got exposed by the media, the fans, and his teammates and coaching staff when he refused to dunk on Trae Young, who was a smaller guard than him, because he was afraid to go to the free throw line and miss. You just can't have that as a player. You cannot play with fear. You have to operate as if the next shot you take is gonna go in. Shoot or shoot. And Ben exemplified the complete opposite of that. And that is one of the things that the Brooklyn Nets need to fix right away. They don't need that kind of Ben Simmons. And the reason I'm so focused on Ben Simmons working on his free throws is because Ben Simmons, the way he scores most of his points how? Inside the paint, transitions, screens, off the screens, stuff like that. If you're scoring a lot of your points in the paint, chances are you're going to get fouled. And you need to be able to go in and make your free throws. Because when push comes to shove, the team's going to depend on you to make those shots. Just like how the 76ers were depending on Ben Simmons to make the right play. Go up, go dunk on Trae Young. Have the mentality of either I'm going to make this or I'm going to go to the free throw line. But you become a liability when you start thinking the free throw line is some sort of boogeyman, right? And so that's why Ben Simmons must overcome whatever was going on with him psychologically. If Ben is going to work with the Brooklyn Nets, if he's going to work with Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, we can't have the Ben Simmons that was in Philadelphia. You can't have a guy who's 6'10", who's afraid to dunk the ball over a guy who's barely 6'1". That's just unacceptable. It's a hard thing for Ben Simmons to overcome. But the Ben Simmons that the Brooklyn Nets need is the Ben Simmons that's going to run the floors, that's going to be aggressive on defense, that's going to be vocal, that can make his free throws, that's going to be part of their leadership, that's going to buy into Steve Nash's vision. Right? I think that Ben Simmons can really level up the Brooklyn Nets. And I think if Ben Simmons can become comfortable with his teammates, I think it opens up the door for him to shine and show the world what kind of player he is. Because that is one of the things that's special about Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is a peculiar type of player. And the reason I say comfortable is because Ben Simmons is a type of player that plays well or does well based on his mental well-being. There are players that are not like that. Great examples of these are Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, all the greats. They play well regardless of the situation. Ben Simmons isn't quite like that. Ben Simmons needs the constant support from his coaches and his teammates in order to actually really play well. Ben Simmons drives his confidence from the outside world. I know that's a terrible mentality to have, but that's just the kind of player he is. Like, remember, the whole friction between Ben Simmons and the Philadelphia 76ers began because Joel Embiid and Doc Rivers called Ben Simmons out for not dunking that ball, right? And I don't agree with what they did because they shouldn't have aired him out in a public press conference. They should have told him behind closed doors. Doc Rivers could have let loose on him all he wanted behind closed doors, but to call him out in a public press conference and point him out to say that he's the reason we lost, even though it's true, it just didn't look good for the organization. And that really took a toll on Ben Simmons' confidence and his mentality. And the Brooklyn Nets, Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, they need to know that's the type of player that Ben Simmons is. Like, he derives his confidence from outside world. If the crowd is cheering him on, if people are cheering him on, he does better. The opposite is also true. If they can get Ben Simmons to perform well, they can make him comfortable, I think he can be a real asset to them and make all of the difference for them next year. And that's one of the things I also wanted to talk about, where the Brooklyn Nets are going to be next year. I think the Brooklyn Nets are going to do better next year than they did. Why? Because last year was an eye-opening, humbling experience for the Brooklyn Nets. And even Kyrie Irving spoke about that being swept in the first round really humbled him and really opened their eyes. And I think that's the same thing that happened to Kevin Durant when he tried to leave the Brooklyn Nets, and no one was willing to offer him anything because of how the Brooklyn Nets performed. It was an indictment on Kevin Durant. And I think that was a real humbling experience that let those two know that, listen, you're not the type of juggernaut we thought you were. Other teams aren't as scared of you as we thought they were. And if you really want to go deep into the playoffs, you're going to have to earn it. And so I think with that mentality coming into the season, I think the Brooklyn Nets are going to do better instead of last year where everybody was just saying, wrap it up, we don't even need to have the season, we should just have the Brooklyn Nets and the Lakers play in the finals and see who wins. Really ironic. But guys, those are just my thoughts on Ben Simmons. If you like this kind of content, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, kids.